The United Nations has called it a shadow pandemic, one that has intensified during this COVID-19 public health crisis. Shelters across Canada are seeing a disturbing escalation of violence against women and girls during this pandemic, as crisis calls have also dramatically increased. Disturbing data emerging from the annual Shelter Voices report, a snapshot of what shelters and transitional homes across Canada are dealing with during this pandemic.
With COVID-19, it really was, a pandemic within a pandemic.
This year, at least 10 women are on Toronto's homicide list. In at least 7 cases, men have been charged with their deaths. Frontline workers report seeing higher frequency of abuse in all forms, particularly physical attacks and specifically stabbing, strangulations, forced confinement, sexual violence, and increased human trafficking. The survey states COVID-19 has made it more difficult for women to leave.
Women in really difficult situations, trying to figure out which pandemic am I best to live with. And a lot had concerns about catching COVID-19.
The report notes a trend between the first phase of the pandemic and when restrictions were lifted between June and October, finding that calls for help dropped significantly and fewer clients access supports during the initial lockdowns. But now, with more regions seeing a spike in cases, there are fears that things could get worse.
The public health messaging was clearly to stay home. But, if home was not safe, then, it was important for us to get out the message that you don't need to stay home, that there were alternatives.
Another chilling report, Ontario's annual femicide list featuring the names of 35 women suspected of being killed by men. The youngest, just 4 years old. The oldest, a 95-year-old woman from Toronto.
There may be women who have been killed that haven't been captured on this list because this list is reliant on media reports that we track throughout the year.
As experts call on more supports and services for gender-based violence, there are also calls to bring attention to the factors that put victims at risk.
There's an interconnection between the availability of resources, reaching women sooner, doing that prevention work with men who abuse, getting to them sooner, having more adequate responses in the criminal justice system.
Frontline workers want me to convey this message. If you're experiencing violence at home, there is help out there, and shelters remain open during this pandemic, and they tell me they're all following public health guidelines. There's more to the story. If you take your cell phone camera and you point it to the code at the bottom of the screen, it'll take you to our website, citynews.ca, where you can also access this report. For City News, I'm Faiza Amin.